So what if you already have all the power you need to achieve literally anything you want? Well, according to Tony Robbins, that's not just some nice, feel-good thought, it's a fact. And today, we're going to dive into his core principles to figure out how to unlock that power. Let's get right into it.
All right, let me ask you a question. Would you, right now, walk barefoot across 10 feet of burning hot coals? I know, it sounds completely insane, right? But believe it or not, this is a huge part of Tony Robbins' seminars. It's called the fire walk. But it's not really about testing how much pain you can take.
You see, the fire walk is really just a powerful metaphor. The whole idea is, if you can walk on fire, something you thought was absolutely impossible, then what else in your life that seems impossible can you actually conquer? It's all about teaching you that fear is just a state of mind. Once you get a handle on your mind, well, nothing is off the table.
So how do we actually do this? How do we make it happen? Robbins breaks it all down into a really practical blueprint he calls the ultimate success formula. It's a simple, repeatable pattern he noticed in pretty much all of the world's most successful people. Here it is, 4 simple steps. First, know your outcome. What is your target? Precisely. You have to be crystal clear. Second, you have to take massive action. You know, a dream without action is really just a wish. Third, pay attention to what you're getting back. Is what you're doing actually working? This is all about getting feedback. And finally, number 4, you gotta be flexible. Keep changing your approach until you get what you want. It's this continuous loop.
Now that sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's take a look at someone who used this exact formula, probably without even realizing it, to build an absolute empire from nothing.
When he was just 17 years old, a young Steven Spielberg had his target locked in. It was crystal clear. He knew exactly what he wanted to be. And that was step 1, set your target. It wasn't vague, it was this super specific, driving ambition that guided every single thing he did next.
So his next step? Massive action. And I mean massive. He didn't just fill out an application for an internship. No, for 3 years, he dressed up in a suit, carried his dad's briefcase with nothing but a sandwich inside, and just walked right past the security guards at Universal Studios like he owned the place. He found an empty trailer, put his name on the door, and spent his days just watching, listening, and learning from anybody he could find.
And this shows you the final 2 steps perfectly. He was constantly monitoring what worked and changing his approach. After years of giving himself this, let's call it an unconventional education, he made a short film, showed it to studio executives, and boom! At just 20 years old, they offered him a 7-year contract. He didn't wait for anyone's permission, he just went out and created his own path.
But here's the thing. Taking that kind of insane action requires a very specific mindset. It's not just about what you do. It's about the state of mind you're in while you're doing it. And this is where mastering your internal world becomes absolutely critical.
Just consider this story of 2 different men. On one side, you have the comedian John Belushi. I mean, from the outside, the guy had everything. Fame, wealth, success. But on the inside, he felt empty and totally alone. Then you have W. Mitchell. He had 2 horrific accidents. One left him horribly burned, the other paralyzed him from the waist down. But somehow, he stayed positive, became a millionaire, and lived this incredibly happy life. The difference wasn't their circumstances, it was their internal state.
So how in the world do we control that internal state? Tony Robbins teaches a tool for this called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP. The easiest way to think about it is like a user manual for your own brain. It's all about consciously choosing the thoughts that create positive emotions, which then, you guessed it, fuel powerful actions.
You know, our minds really only operate in 2 basic states. First, there's the enabling state, where you feel confident, joyful, and strong. In this state, you feel like you can do literally anything. And then, there's the paralyzing state. This one is filled with fear, doubt, and worry. And in this state, even the simplest tasks feel completely impossible.
And here is the most crucial point of all. You are not a victim of your mental states, you are the director. You have the power to consciously shift from a paralyzing state to an enabling one anytime you want, just by changing what you focus on.
So what dictates our state? What's the foundation of our entire mindset, really? It all boils down to one thing: our core beliefs. Beliefs are basically the commands we send to our own nervous system, and they ultimately determine everything we do.
I mean, just look at the path of Abraham Lincoln.
Failure after failure, personal tragedy, professional setbacks, over and over again. Most people would have given up a long, long time ago. But his underlying belief that he could serve and make a real difference drove him forward, turning what anyone else would see as a life of failure into one of America's greatest presidencies.
Robbins argues that the most successful people all tend to adopt a few key beliefs. Two of the most powerful are these. First, the belief that everything happens for a reason and it's there to serve you. And second, the belief that there's no such thing as failure. There are only results, only outcomes. This first belief is illustrated perfectly by a woman named Marilyn Hamilton. After a climbing accident left her paralyzed, she could have just seen it as the end of her life. But instead, she got frustrated with her heavy, clunky wheelchair and saw an opportunity. She decided to use her own experience to build a much better one.
So she teamed up with a couple of friends and founded a company called Motion Designs. And that company, born from what most people would call a tragedy, grew into $1 million business that completely revolutionized the industry and improved countless lives. Her belief that this happened for her, not to her, is what created that incredible result.
Now, the power of belief isn't just psychological. It can create real physical changes in our bodies. And the most famous example of this is something we've all heard of, the placebo effect. In one famous study, 2 groups of ulcer patients were given the exact same thing, a simple sugar pill. But group 1 was told it was an experimental drug, and only about 26% of them reported feeling any relief. But group 2, they were told it was a new, highly effective drug, and in that group, a staggering 70% reported significant relief. The only difference was their belief in the cure.
So when you start to put all of this together, you have a clear formula for success. You have mastery over your mental state, and you have a foundation of empowering beliefs. You really start to see the path to unlocking your own unlimited power. The central message in all of this is that you don't need to look outside yourself for the resources you need to change your life. The formula, the ability to control your mind, the capacity for belief, it's all already in there. You just have to learn how to use it.
It really all comes down to this simple but incredibly profound idea. It's not your background, it's not your education, it's not your circumstances holding you back. The only limits that truly exist are the ones we create in our own minds.
So the question isn't whether or not you have this power, because you do. The only question that really matters now is, what are you going to do with it?